Well, before we jump into some of the experiences that you have had, which I think are just fascinating and should like really help to inform this moment in time, both for the Red Sox and for other teams, I wanted to ask whether or not like the news of yesterday was twofold in Red Sox land. First, that Alex Cora was getting extended, that they have now reached an agreement with him to stay around as Red Sox manager through 2027. Secondly, Craig Breslow took us off the fence and said that the Red Sox are going to be looking to upgrade the 2024 team. Curious for your initial reactions. Are you surprised that a whole 6 days before the trade deadline, Craig Breslow was declaring the Red Sox as buyers? And are you surprised after all of the questions over the last few months about whether Alex Cora would be back that he's going to be back?
Yeah, I was really happy to see the news on Alex. I love Alex. I think what he's done with this roster is really impressive. Not surprising in the sense that he's so good at getting the most out of his talent, but I'm really happy for him and his family and that he's got some security there and a good move by the Red Sox. As far as what Craig said, I think it's great. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised. I think they're in a position where they have an opportunity to make the wild card and now that it's not just a one game coin flip game, they have a better chance than when it used to be those rules, to win a 3-game series. And so I think what makes me happy about that, to hear that, is that they're picking a lane. And I think that's what's most important. Now, does it mean that they're all in on, rentals and things like that? It probably shouldn't mean that. It probably should mean they're looking to get either value deals on rentals or deals that help them for both this year and in the future.
Now, Zach, I kind of wanted to touch on your relationship a little more with Alex Cora. I know that you had a nice communicative based relationship with him back in 2018 and whatnot. But to see what happened and to kind of walk us through the process of the decision to make this a pleasant surprise for the organization mid-season, what was the process that went into this? And could you explain a little bit about what your relationship was like with Alex Cora and what made it so special?
Yeah, I met Alex. Well, we had him as a player, but as when we hired him as a manager, we right away connected. He was coming from the Astros, where they were very analytically inclined, and so he had been exposed to a lot of tools there to use to help them on the field, and he wanted something similar in Boston, and so it was great. We connected right away. There was a lot he wanted to do. He was very engaged, and we went and did a ton of good work for him. The people in the analytics department did great work and collaborated with the coaching staff to try to get everyone on the same page for this kind of new way that he wanted to do things. As far as his contract extension, I mean, I can't speak to the details of how that happened, but I know Alex has always spoken fondly of his time in Boston, and there's a lot of people there that he's closely connected to, and so I'm sure that feels good for him. Also, he's got to balance that with looking at, what Craig Counsell got with the Cubs last year, changing the market for managers. And, maybe you have to go become a free agent to get that, but it seems like he got pretty close to that on a shorter term. And so good for him. I'm happy for him.
So getting to the question of picking a lane, that is an interesting one, right? And you've been through the exercise of having to figure that out, like not being necessarily certain about what lane you pick. I feel like, there have been times more than just last year. Obviously, everyone is coming off of a 2023 season in which there was this kind of suggestion that like the Red Sox did nothing. In 2022, there was the like kind of ambivalence of how the Red Sox approached the deadline, where it was they dealt Christian Vazquez for Wilyer Abreu and Manuel Valdez. In retrospect, great deal, but at the same time, they kind of made these ads that were. They made these marginal upgrades for Eric Hosmer, and it was kind of like they were trying to do a little bit of both, and it ended up being a little confusing. You've been part of past Red Sox deadlines where the team was interested in upgrading and did nothing. I think back to, for instance, 2005, 2006. You've been part of deadlines where you were on the fence. 2012 being a great example, where the Red Sox were within arm's reach of a wild card spot at the deadline, ended up basically holding pat and then watching the team collapse. What goes into a front office's decision? Like, what are those last days like leading up to a deadline? How much are you living and dying with like standing shifts, those, day-to-day standing shifts that are kind of anathema to what the 162 game schedule is about?
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful to not be living and dying, as you said, with the day to day and each game result. Unless you go into a stretch when you're about, you know, 10 days or so from a deadline, you kind of look at it as, we have several games. It should take quite a bit. Either you win 8 out of those 10, you lose 8 out of those 10 for it to really change the direction you're going in. So you don't want to be in that spot. But you're human and that can happen as you're doing the moment. I think more recently 2019 as a place where we were kind of on the fence, close to a wild card, trying to figure out whether we should buy or sell, and Mookie Betts being like the key guy. Do we sell him now, knowing that we'd probably trade him in the offseason? That was a huge decision to make. And unfortunately, we had a hot stretch right before the deadline where we won a few games against the Yankees. Mookie hit 3 homers. And, we decided to not make a move there. And I think we probably could have done better by the organization if we did at that time. And then, of course, we, lose 8 straight games and then are out of it. So those decisions are hard. I think you have to, take a big picture look. It's hard to ride the fence. It's hard to sell and buy. I think that's been the mistake in the past is if you're going to sell, just sell and do what's best for the future. If you're going to do what's best try to improve the present team, well, it's hard to subtract and add, and actually you're not going to improve the team when you do that. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul type of thing. And so, pick one direction and go with it. Now, you can do that in different ways, as I mentioned before. If you're going to buy, but you're in this kind of position that the Red Sox find themselves in now, then, maybe you take it just a different approach on the types of players that you're bringing in, rentals versus controllable players.
Yeah, although there's going to be a scarcity of controllable players, or you have to make that decision of, okay, we're willing to deal from the very top of our farm system. Natalie and I were just talking about the big 3 in Portland of Marcelo Meyer, Roman Anthony, Kyle Teal, who are generally viewed, like the Red Sox identified them last offseason as basically being their future and when they expected to contend. And so it would be an awfully interesting pivot to me, if they wanted to get into the controllable market for starting pitchers, the Garrett Crochets of the world, the Scoobles of the world. You aren't doing that without at least one of those guys in the conversation, right, and maybe more than that. Who sets that direction? How does a decision about, like, when you're on the fence, like when it's not just crystal clear, like, we're buyers this year. Right. Who are the different who are the different stakeholders who contribute to that decision, and who has final say over we're buying or we're selling?
Right. Well, I think it's, who's leading your baseball operation. So in this case, Craig Breslow works with his team in baseball ops to figure out what they believe is the right direction for the club. And then they communicate that to ownership and say, this is what we believe and here's why. And oftentimes there's a conversation there, whether, they may push back on it. They may just, rubber stamp it. But there's usually a conversation, and there could be just a conversation for them to gain understanding. It could be a disagreement. And so you got to kind of pound the table as that person in Craig's seat. But it's really up to that person. I think that's one of the things that John Henry generally has done a good job of in the past when I was there, was empowering that leader to make the case, to make that decision and move forward with it. But yeah, I agree. As far as those top 3 guys, you probably aren't moving. When I say controllable players, I don't necessarily mean those impact guys, because they are going to cost a lot, and probably, I'm not sure the Red Sox are only one player away from winning a championship. So maybe that's, pushing all your chips in the middle is probably not the right move. But there are some guys, it's acquiring the starting pitcher that has an extra year of control versus, the guy that's purely a rental.